My arrows shoot erratically, or group right or left of the bullseye. Why? And what should I do?
If you're experiencing these issues, we have 5 troubleshooting topics that we want to cover in this segment that should help resolve any erratic flight or grouping issues you may be experiencing. The first topic regarding the arrows. You're going to want to make sure that you're using the same brand and same type of arrow. And of course, Parker requires that you use a Parker brand or a Red Hot brand arrow, 400 grains, 20 inches, outfitted with the capture knock. These arrows are specifically designed to be used with Parker crossbows, and they work together as a system, making sure the safe and performance and accuracy that you would expect are actually achieved. Next, you'll want to make sure that when you're shooting, you do not use 2 different arrows, one for practice and one for hunting. For example, you wouldn't want to use the hunter arrows for practice and the red hot arrows for hunting. They have slightly different weights, they have different fletchings, they also have different inserts and different front of center points. So they're going to have different flight trajectories, and they're going to hit the target in different places. So that's one thing you're going to want to check first. Next, you're going to want to check the condition of your arrow to make sure that it's in good operating condition. Using this arrow as an example, you'll notice first that the fletching is damaged. In this case, it would need to be replaced. Next, you'll notice that the knock has also been damaged in one of the shots, and this knock would need to be replaced. Third, this shaft is actually damaged in 2 places. The first place it's damaged is back where the knock gets inserted. It actually has been cracked, which is the reason why the knock will not fit snugly into the shaft. Next, this arrow is actually damaged in the center, and you can determine that if you can't visually inspect it by flexing the arrow, and you'll notice that when you try to flex the arrow and it's damaged, it will fully break. Third, you'll want to make sure that the arrow is properly loaded and indexed into the crossbow during the shot. You'll want to make sure that the cock vane is loaded down. You'll want to make sure that the knock is indexed correctly, which would be at 90 degrees to the cock vane. And you'll want to make sure that when you insert the arrow into the barrel with the cock vane down, that the capture knock fully captures the string, as I'm demonstrating here. Next, you'll want to make sure that you're matching the broadheads and the field points. In this particular case, I have 100 grain field points on this particular arrow, 125 grain field points on this particular arrow, and as you can see, the additional weight makes the field point longer. These 2 arrows are going to have 2 very different flight trajectories. And in a hunting environment, I'm going to be using a 100 grain broadhead. The 100 grain field point is going to fly very similar to the 100 grain broadhead, but it's going to have a different trajectory than the 125 grain field point. So you want to make sure that you're matching the weights on your field points and broadheads. Lastly, you'll want to check to make sure that the scope is mounted properly. First, you'll want to make sure that the ring is aligned correctly. In this particular example, the rings are misaligned, and you'll notice that the scope will actually tilt back and forth because the rings are not squared. You'll also notice in this particular example that the ring is actually mounted in a cockeyed fashion on the front ring. You'll notice a large space here compared to a smaller space here, and this large space compares with no space on the other side of the ring. The rings will need to be squared and evenly positioned and tightened onto the scope itself. Next, you'll want to make sure that the rings are spaced properly so that they can actually fit securely onto the mounting rail. The mounting rail has these slots machined into it, and the rings are designed to fit down in those slots. You do not want to have the rings positioned so that the rearward ring is in the slot and the front one is out of the slot, or vice versa. So with that securely positioned in the slots, the last thing you want to do is make sure that the screws are securely tightened and that the scope is firmly fitted to the rail. With those suggestions and recommendations, you should be able to resolve all of your erratic flight or grouping issues. If not, we'd ask you to call our customer service line for some additional assistance.